Hello, BookTube, and welcome back. So, it's October, it's getting colder, and we're edging ever so closely to Halloween. Not the biggest fan of Halloween. So, what are you doing this video for, Al? Who knows? But I thought I might give you some recommendations for fantasy horror, or I think it's called dark fantasy, or whatever it's called. I'm not 100% sure. I've read quite a lot of horror books, and also quite a lot of dark-esque horror fantasy books out there. Not the biggest fan of horror books. They usually don't do anything for me, but I've managed to pull some kind of good, fantasy horror books out there. So fantasy horror books, well, what would you expect from like a dark fantasy book? So you're talking murders, very great characters, monsters, the supernatural, all that kind of good stuff. And I guess what's what what separates the two genres of horror and fantasy horror? I guess horror is intently trying to scare you, whereas fantasy horror is more, isn't it, rather than trying to scare you. And of course, maybe another kind of difference is horror is usually set in the real world when a supernatural force infects someone, and in fantasy horror, it's all fantastical. I mean, they're kind of wide paintbrush ways of describing things. I don't think there's any real difference between the two genres. They're just two things I've just come up with at the top of my head. So I'll give you my 5 top picks if you want to get into the really kind of dark, fantasy-esque horror genre. So I'm going to go no particular order. I'm just going to start with a book series that I absolutely adored and picked up when I was a kid, to be honest with you. I was about 12, 13, and this is Stephen King's The Gunslinger, which I think, the main books are up here. I believe now in the Gunslinger series there's actually 8 books. There's the 4 original books that Stephen King wrote earlier on in his career in the 80s, I believe, and then he left a big gap to finish. You can't really see them, but the hardbacks are down there. Books 5, 6, and 7. The Dark Tower, it's multiple genres. The Dark Tower, it's western, it's horror, it's fantasy, it's science fiction, but it's got all those good horror-esque moments in what you expect from Stephen King. And so you got monsters, you got really grim death, and you really got strong fantasy themes running all the way through this. And you got magic and whatnot. I don't let a lot of people are put off by the western motif, but it's not a strong western motif. It's still very much one firm foot in the fantasy genre, and a pretty good firm foot in the science fiction genre as well, because there's portals between our world and Roland's world, who is the main character throughout that's 8 books, 7 in the main series, and there's one book what bridges the gap between 4 and 5. Now it's about Roland. First book is him trying to hunt down the Man in Black. He's like this mysterious person who might be able to transform into a giant spider, and he meets up with a cast of characters throughout the series. You've got Eddie, who is addicted to drugs in our real world. You've got Susanna, who's got a split personality, and you've got the boy Jake, who is trying to be a gunslinger like Roland. And they come to our world to help Roland eventually get to the Dark Tower, which is the main plot line of this book series. Now, books 1 to 4, so you got the Gunslinger, the Drawing of the Free, the Wastelands, I should practice this, shouldn't I, and Wizard and Glass. So they're the first 4 that he ripped quite early, and they are fantastic. I do love those 4 books. But in typical Stephen, I know I'm giving you a recommendation and I'm slagging it off. In typical Stephen King fashion, it's very much some people like it, some people don't like it. I don't think the series ended that great, to be honest with you. I mean, Stephen King puts himself in the books. Okay, and in books 5, there's lightsabers and people dressed as Doctor Doom. There's all sorts of craziness going on, but it's well worth picking up. It really is, just for the first 4 books themselves. Though, read the first book. If you don't like the first book, then don't continue the series. You don't need to. But if you like the flavour of the first book, give it a chance. It's a really good series. And after he finished all 7 books, Stephen, he came back with what I told you, I'll get bridge between books, 4 and 5. And it's called A Wind Through the Keyhole. It's a great little book. I thought I might as well get it because I've got the series. It's a great little book, this. It's basically in the house and Roland telling the people who's come with him just a story, like a tale from old times. It's really good. It's a really good little story for a Stephen King novel. As you can tell, I'm 50-50 with all the Stephen King books I've read, whether I like them or not. But The Dark Tower by Stephen King, well, the Gunslinger series, whatever it's called, I think it's called The Dark Tower series, you should pick up and read because it is kind of special, especially the first 4. Okay, folks, that's my first recommendation. The second recommendation, we're getting to more like the emo side of dark fantasy right now, and that is the Coldfire trilogy by C.J. Friedman. I think it's C.S. Friedman. Yeah, and it's a trilogy, so it's Black Sun Rising, When True Night Falls, and Crown of Shadows. And it's the basic plot line of this is there's good and a bad guy who team up and try and defeat a bigger bad. That's the plot of all 3 books. And so it is, good and bad teaming up to fight an even more powerful bad. And there's the good guy, I think his name's Damien, he's kind of like a priest, self-important, and he basically changes character quite a lot from the first to the 3rd book. It becomes less pious. And Tarrant, who is the bad guy, he's a vampire. He feeds on people's emotions and drains them. And he is pretty much an emo. But the whole series has got that dark vibe to it. It is gloomy. There's no cheery points in this. There's no funny points at all. It is. I was going to say dreary, then that's a negative, isn't it? It is moody. It is dark. And it's them 2 trying to crack on to beat this other more powerful big bad who's trying to, destroy this fantasy world. I think it's Calastro or Calastro. It's been a while since I read it. I think that's the main bad's big name. Yeah, so it's all about, those 2 button heads all the time on this journey to beat the bad guy. And there's other cast of characters who come in and out of the series, but they're the main 2 on how they interact. So it was pure good and pure evil. And then when a series, comes to its end, they kind of blend. There's one's less pious and one's less evil. It's all that kind of stuff, But pick it up if that sounds like your kind of flavour. Very moody, very emo fantasy, and it's fairly well written as well. So that's the Coldfire trilogy by C.S. Friedman, I think it is. Now, my third recommendation for you is a book I've spoken to you before. This is The Abhorsen by Garth Nix. Now, this is not only my favourite horror fantasy, dark fantasy, whatever you want to call it, book, but it's also my favourite young adult fantasy. I think this is amazing. And I've not listened to it. I've only read these books, but I believe Tim Curry does the audiobooks. I mean, if that doesn't sell it, I don't know what would. But The Abhorsen, I believe there's 5 books. I might be mistaken. I left it at 5 books. There's the main trilogy. So there's Sabriel, Lyriel, and The Abhorsen, which is the main trilogy. There's a prequel called Clariel, who's, one of the characters who appears in the main trilogy. She's bad. And the sequel to the main trilogy, which is Golden Hand, or I think it is Golden Hand or Golden Paw or something like that. The name escapes me. But forget those 2. Let's focus on the main trilogy because it is really good. I was absolutely blown away because I was like, I don't really want to read YA, but it is well worth it, and it's still quite dark, even for a young adult book. So the first book can be separated from the trilogy. So the first book is Sabriel, and her father is the Abhorsen, and the Abhorsen is, you kind of like make sure the dead stay dead. Goes through gates and make sure everything's fine. Okay, and he goes missing. So the whole first book is about Sabriel trying to find her father and make everything good again. I'm not going to spoil it any more than that. And the following two books are set 15 years in the future. I might as well say Sabriel's still in the second and third volume, but second and third volume focuses more on Lyriel, who is the main character. At the start, she's like a really, she's a crap witch, if you want to call them. I can't remember the actual terminology for them in the books, but she's a witch in waiting, and she teams up with Prince. I think it's Sam. And there's two other animals, and they're great. One's Margaret, a talking demonic cat, who's probably my favourite of the series, and the disreputable dog, who's kind of like an angelic dog. Oh, the good. It's all about those two, Lyriel and Prince Sam, trying to fight back the forces of darkness that are trying to now overwhelm the world with the help of Margaret and the disreputable dog, and eventually Sabriel as well. Pick up this series, you won't be disappointed. It is really, really well done. And did I say it's by Garth Nix? I think it did. And if it's not your favourite YA fantasy, it should be in your top 5, because it is really, really good. Okay, that's 3, folks. So my 4th one for you. Oh, this is one of the trilogies I first picked up in the late 90s. I think I was in high school, early 90s, so it's been a while. And I think the trilogy came out in the 1970s, so it's, if you want to call it dated or whatever, but it's still, it's fiendishly evil. It's great. It's good. This is Gods in Darkness, or Of Darkness. I think it's In Darkness, and it's by Carl Wagner. I think he's got Carl Edward Wagner or something like that. And again, it's a trilogy. Mind you, I think he actually came up with a few prequels, but I know them as a trilogy. So it is Bloodstone, Dark Crusade, and something Weaves. Darkness Weaves. And it's all about this main character called Cain, who is an immortal, but gets thrown out of the utopian society, and he's a proper nightmare. He's the very definition of a super villain who is the hero of the story. He is the hero of the story. Did I say his name Cain? But he goes around the place. He's very nihilistic. He sorts all problems out with his sword and his power. It's chilling. It's such an amazing read, though. It really will pull you in, because the author Carl, he doesn't pull any punches. This is proper dark fantasy at its finest, because the main character you're reading about does not care, and the only way he can die, because he's an immortal, is to be killed by his own dark actions. it's something special. I mean, because I don't think they got reprints of this trilogy, so you might have to go to your secondhand bookstores to pick it up. World of Books might be able to. World of Books, well, who knows? The massive Amazon might have a few spare copies, but if you find it, pick this series up. It's not only really great dark fantasy, but it's also fantastic fantasy in and of itself. So that's Gods in Darkness. And the last one I want to talk about is, I came late to the party in this one, and I think it's still a trilogy again, and I can never remember the title of the third book, but it's by Daniel Polanski. It's Lowtown, Tomorrow the Killing, and I think She Waits or something like that is the third book. I can't remember. But this is like a noir, evil cop kind of thing, and it's very much in the same kind of vein as the Dresden Files, but it's set in a fantasy land. It's not set in Chicago. And the warden, who's the main character in this series, he's he's a cop. He's a bit of a rogue. Addicted to drugs. Not kind of not evil, but a grey character. I wouldn't trust him basically, and it's all him solving these gruesome things what happen over the course of this trilogy, and getting his hands dirty. This all the way through this again, it's a noir kind of thing, and it's just relentless action all the time throughout the whole trilogy, and it's fairly well written. People's complaints about this trilogy is that sometimes it's too dark to enjoy. Oh, that's just like your opinion, man. But yeah, Lowtown and Tomorrow the Killing and She Waits, I think is the third title of Daniel Polanski's work. So pick up Lowtown. If you can't get past Lowtown, don't do the other two, because I think the other two are darker than the first one. And that's it, folks. So that's my top five recommendations for you for like a dark fantasy. So I mentioned the Gunslinger, I mentioned the Coldfire trilogy, the Abhorsen, I mentioned Gods and Darkness, and the Lowtown trilogy. Pick them up if that sounds interesting to any of you, and I'll speak to you soon. Goodbye, BookTube.